Savvy Central Radio, drawing out the best from our guests, with host Christina Nichman.
Carleen Pettit, author of Flight to Success. Be the captain of your life. Inspiration, motivation, and lessons learned. Flight to Success is the author's journey through 8 airlines, 7 type ratings, 2 master degrees, and motherhood. Flight to Success, intertwined with her stories, are those of others who share their successes, failures, loss, fears, hopes, and dreams. The secrets correlate with many aspects of flight. If you apply the tips in Flight to Success to your daily life, there is nothing you cannot accomplish. To find out more and get your copy today, visit CarleenPettit, PETITT.com. Our guest today is Bob Kantor, executive coach, speaker, and author, who provides real-world tested leadership tools, tips, and techniques. His programs are based on his signature system, the Simple Leadership Lifecycle, as outlined in his book, Shatter Your Leadership Limits. Better results in less time with less stress. To get a free copy of Bob's book today, along with free access to his 8-module course, Lessons on Leadership, sign up today at cantorconsultinggroup.com in the upper right-hand corner. Hi, Bob. Welcome to Savvy Central Radio. How are you?
I'm doing very well, Christina. How are you?
I'm very well, and I'm glad that you're coming on our audience today to talk about your expertise. You help businesses out there, consultants and executives, transform their businesses, make more money. How did you get into becoming an executive consultant and building your business?
Okay, well, what I'd really like to do is focus on the coaching portion of it.
Okay.
Because a lot of the consulting that I do is really helping other leaders be more effective. And that's true whether they're small businesses and solopreneurs or whether they're large global international companies. I've got over 30 years of experience myself, and what I learned over the years was that the highest leverage that I had as a leader and as a consultant was in helping other people maximize and achieve their potential. So as my career advanced and as I helped deliver better and better results for employers and clients, what I discovered was that it was the coaching and helping others be more effective that really provided not only leverage, but also a lot of the satisfaction. So about 5 years ago, I stepped out of my corporate role, hung out my shingle, and I've been doing this executive coaching and consulting ever since.
Wow. And you've written some impressive papers on women in leadership, and I thought it was very fascinating. And women, it's interesting because I see that women don't really live up to being full leaders sometimes, and they certainly have the capacity, but you listed some steps in which they can live up to their full leadership and possibilities. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, in my coaching practice, I'd say that maybe 20 to 25% of my clients are female executives. And unfortunately, I see a recurring pattern. And that is that, at least in the North American culture, which would include the U.S. and Canada, I see far too many corporate executives who happen to be female, who just don't have the confidence that they ought to have. A shame and a frustration because so many of these women actually have the competence to be extraordinary leaders, and it's just lacking the confidence to step into their potential that holds them back and makes it more difficult for them to achieve their true potential.
And I've witnessed that myself, working in some huge corporations, coming in there as a consultant myself, as a financial consultant, and it boggled me to see people in really super high positions, women that is, who are, controllers or CFOs or vice presidents, doing things that they have no right doing. I stepped into one situation where there was a woman vice president and they were having problems with their tech department not showing up for work, and she was on the floor playing around with cables and such. I'm like, you are a VP. Get your butt off the floor. Get someone else to do that. But this is something I would never see a man doing. Why do women do that?
Well, I could see some men doing that, but item in the newspaper just last week caught my eye about the chairman of a board running a board meeting surrounded by senior VPs, and not surprisingly, only one of the other members of the board was a female executive. And partway through the meeting, he decided that he needed a cup of coffee. And he turned to the one female senior VP in the room and singled her out to ask her to please bring him a cup of coffee. Now, why didn't he turn to one of the guys in the room with a similar request? There is so much going on. I call it subtle and sometimes not so subtle discrimination, or I've even called it psychological abuse going on in the workplace. And there was a wonderful article, I think it was in the Huffington Post, in their blog, about a letter written from a father to his teenage daughter while he was hanging out in the makeup aisle of one of the large department stores. And it was really pointing out that so much of the way we position and message women in our culture, and again, North American culture, is so demeaning, and it's so much about how they are not good enough. And it puts them so far behind the eight ball. And I see so many women just not comfortable enough, confident enough to leverage their strengths when they walk into challenging work situations.
How might women engage more powerfully and in their leadership roles in corporate America and in executive positions?
Okay, that's a great question. And I've got a couple of ideas along those lines. And I just want to clarify up front that what I'm about to share, I think, is relatively simple. And I like to distinguish simple from easy. So it's not easy to do the things that we're about to talk about, and yet I do believe that it's relatively simple. So the first is that I think that all of us in general, and women in particular, need to take responsibility for everything that happens to us and around us. And I think you've heard me talk about how sometimes women executives aren't that far ahead of some of their colleagues who have abusive relationships. In an abusive relationship, whether it's in the workplace or it's domestic, one of the first things that any of us need to do is to take full responsibility for the situation that we're in. And I think it's really important not to confuse taking responsibility for taking the blame. However, even when we're in a situation that isn't our fault, the only way we're going to change the situation is by totally owning it. And that means stepping up to it, understanding that we are in the situation because we're choosing to remain in the situation. We are in the situation because we are choosing to behave a certain way when confronted with the situation. And until and unless we make different choices, the situation isn't going to change. So number one is we have to take responsibility. And in fact, when we blame others and don't take responsibility, that's when we find ourselves in the victim role.
Yeah. And it's interesting you mentioned that, Bob, because I remember I was in a leadership position as a supervisor in a really huge corporation many years ago. And when my department would not perform and they came back to me and said, what happened? I said, it's my full responsibility. It's my job to make sure my department runs efficiently. And so I take full responsibility. And what are we going to do to fix it? And I would list a couple of options that we could start with. And some of my other level executives in other departments were like, what are you doing? You just threw yourself under the bus. That's crazy. I'm like, no, that's called taking responsibility for your department. That's something you have to do. A good leader is not one that sits here and goes, oh, well, I screwed up or whatever. No, look, I screwed up. Let's fix it.
Right. And when you take that responsibility, there is almost no limit as to the actions that present themselves as options for you. Whereas when you blame others and believe that responsibility lies elsewhere, you are preventing yourself from doing what you're capable of doing. So that's number one. Number two is to be aware that we make choices. Very often, my coaching clients will say to me, well, I have to this or I have to that. And when we feel that we have to do something, we are again giving away our power to choose. When we reframe the I have to I choose to, it frees us up and opens us up to be much more creative and action-oriented. So, for instance, I have to go to this meeting with my senior VP, even though she asked me to attend at the last minute and I've got something else that's really important to do. Versus, I choose to go to the meeting with my senior VP, Or I choose to point out to my senior VP that if she really needs me to be there, obviously I will be there. And at the same time, I've got another critical project that I'm working on. And would it be okay if I sent one of my direct reports to support her in this meeting and not show up myself?
Perfect solution.
Okay. And I see the same thing. So many people, they complain about the jobs that they're in or the way they're being treated at work. Yeah, even when we're doing a job that we're not enjoying too much at the moment, we choose to continue to do that. We can choose not to continue to do that. And I don't mean that we have the freedom to necessarily walk out, but we do have the flexibility and the freedom to start a process in place to find a job that is going to be more effective, rewarding, and appropriate for us.
Yeah, I love that, Bob, because I've heard far too often, whether it's just an employee or some higher level management or supervisor, complain about the situation at a particular job, or we don't get enough pay or this or that. I'm like, listen, you took the salary. You made the negotiation during the time that you were hired for this rate. If you're not happy with it anymore, go look for another job. But to sit here and complain they're not paying you enough just because you showed up.
Bingo. You choose to show up every day.
That's right.
Different choice. And then a third item is to be yourself. One of my favorite stories is one of my clients walked into a room, our first meeting, and she said to me, I want you to help me learn to be rough and tough. She was in a large financial services organization, and she was the only female on a management team of very high alpha males. And I looked at her, and she might have tipped the scales at about 90 pounds.
Wow.
I looked at her and I said, well, why do you want to be rough and tough? And maybe more important, are you rough and tough? And she smiled and she said, no, I'm not. I said, well, then why would you want to pretend to be someone that you're not? Why don't we focus on what strengths and unique gifts you bring to this management team and figure out how to help you leverage those? So long story short, what we recognized was that her ability to build consensus and to be seen as non-threatening by all these guys who were threatened by each other enabled her to really emerge as a very powerful and effective leader by not competing with these guys, but in fact bringing a skill to the table that they were lacking as a team. And she emerged over the course of several months as being a very, very powerful and effective team leader amongst this management group. Okay, a fourth item, and this comes back to the idea of confidence again, and that is to know that you belong. And this may get back to the point you made earlier, Christina, about the woman crawling on the floor with the cables.
Yeah.
You've got to have respect for yourself. You've got to understand and acknowledge that you are, in fact, the leader in the room. You are a leader in the room. And if someone makes inappropriate requests, again, you choose how to respond. You can either say, yes, I will, or you can say, oh, I can see where we need to get that done. Let's discuss the most effective way to engage our resources to do that. Or, okay, I hear the request. Let me get back to you with the best way for my organization to address the request. I often tell people that it's not about being the smartest person in the room, and it's not about having total command of the details, but it is about knowing that you are a leader and you belong in that leadership role so that you can assert yourself as a leader.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Bob. When I first took over working at a particular organization as a supervisor, I would get the direct orders from above and hand it down to my subordinates. I at first was very uncomfortable with the role of leadership, and I would walk around telling my subordinates, can you please do this? You think you could do this? Kind of ending everything with a question mark. And you can imagine that I didn't get very much done. I didn't get my subordinates treating me with respect in the beginning. It took time for me to build that confidence in myself and then hence get them to treat me with the respect. But first I had to treat myself with respect.
Absolutely. And if you can't do it, no one else will.
Absolutely.
And that almost comes back to the first point that we made, Christina, about take responsibility. Be responsible for treating yourself with respect first, and then others will follow that lead.
That makes complete sense. So the fifth one is? Okay.
This was something that one of my coaches shared with me many years ago when he said to me, Bob, you have to try easier, not harder. Too many executives today in general, and too many female executives in particular, try to do it all. And we all know about the women who try to be super moms, super lovers, best daughters, and so on. You can't do it all. Every one of us needs to do is strategically pick and choose where to best focus our energy. And that means that we have to give ourselves permission to say no. Very often, if we are never saying no, we are certainly not empowering our yeses. We have to delegate to others. You talked about that just a minute ago, being able to delegate effectively to people in your organization. We also have to be able to hold other people accountable. So if we are going to delegate, we need to ensure that other people are delivering on our expectations. And if we are not, we have to be prepared to step up to holding them accountable and creating consequences where necessary. And what I really find myself saying very, very often, all execs, more frequently to some of the female executives with whom I work, is slow down, and slow down. It's not about getting more done. It's about being more in the present, being more focused, and leveraging that empathy that distinguishes so many effective executives.
Yeah. And I think you might want to make a distinction as well. I've seen far too many women executives trying to be the best friend of their subordinates, which you can't do. I mean, there's a line there. You can't be their best buddy pal and at the same time hand down orders and also put forth, if necessary, if they don't follow through on the orders you gave them, necessary consequences if you're going to be a best buddy.
That's right. And too many executives, and again, women in particular, have this orientation that says, well, first and foremost, people have to like me.
Yeah.
And it's not about being liked. It is about being respected. And we certainly have to be fair. We certainly have to be rational and reasonable. It doesn't hurt to be sensitive and understanding. However, all of that is in the service of getting the work done. And holding people accountable is not about being mean or demanding. Holding people accountable is ensuring that they are their best selves. Because if we're not holding other people accountable, we are not enabling them to be as effective and successful as they can be. And that's of no better service to them than it is to us or the organizations who employ us.
That is so true. One of my absolute best bosses actually would hold me quite accountable. I started with him. He saw I was taking Spanish courses. And he said, you know what? You're going to start speaking to our Spanish-speaking clients. I want you to work with them. And I was like, you do know I'm not totally bilingual, right? He said, nope, I totally believe in you. You can do this. And actually, him pushing me to and holding me accountable to use the skills I had and to push them just a little bit further actually helped me learn Spanish a lot better and grow as an employee.
Great example. Absolutely.
Yeah. So what's new on the horizon for your business in the coming months?
Well, I've spent the last several years coaching hundreds of business leaders, again, large and small organizations, one-on-one. And what I'm striving to do right now is to put some group coaching programs and offerings in place so that instead of positively impacting hundreds of people, I want to see if this year I can ramp it up by 10 times and maybe begin to impact thousands of people. I love it when someone says to me, wow, this really is simple, isn't it? And they discover so much more power and capability and balance in their lives so that it does become easier and simpler at the same time that it becomes more effective for them.
It doesn't have to be hard. I mean, I think sometimes, like you had said earlier, the idea to please or a lot of these things are our own roadblocks that we put up into making our own lives difficult, but it doesn't necessarily have to be hard, and we don't have to do it alone.
Absolutely, and that's where a good coach can be helpful.
Yes, absolutely. And if they want to find out more about your services and work with your team and with you, how can they do that?
Well, number one, they could connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn as Bob Kantor. That's BOBKANTOR. Or they can go to my website, which is kantorconsultinggroup.com.
Awesome. And as we head on out here, because I know you have to head on to another appointment, what would be your last words of advice or lesson you'd like to share with our audience?
Okay, I guess one of the most powerful one-liners that I use myself and that I've used with others is that in today's complex world, it's no longer enough to be right. We also have to be helpful. Being right is table stakes. You got to get it right. However, those of us who truly excel and succeed go a step beyond, focus on how we can be helpful to the other people with whom we're engaging, the other organizations with whom we're engaging. And when we connect with people by being helpful, then there's no limit to what we can achieve or deliver.
That is a fabulous way to end. And thank you, Bob. Everyone, please go check out Bob's website, kantorconsultinggroup.com. And I want to thank you again, Bob, for coming to Savvy Central Radio.
Christina, thank you so much. Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to talk with you.
Carleen Pettit, author of Flight to Success. Be the captain of your life. Inspiration, motivation, and lessons learned. Flight to Success is the author's journey through 8 airlines, 7 type ratings, 2 master degrees, and motherhood. Flight to Success, intertwined with her stories, are those of others who share their successes, failures, loss, fears, hopes, and dreams. The secrets correlate with many aspects of flight. If you apply the tips in Flight to Success to your daily life, there is nothing you cannot accomplish. To find out more and get your copy today, visit CarleenPettit, PETITT.com. There's some exciting changes coming this 2015 for Savvy. We'll start videocasting some of our interviews. Also, stay tuned for a new book presently being worked on by my co-author and I, Karen Rowe. We'll talk about how to bridge the gap from worker bee to business owner and the lessons we've learned on our journey to entrepreneurship. In addition, this spring we'll start live interview opportunities in Manhattan, which will later be aired on iHeartRadio, a new mix to business networking and interviews. For those interested in participating as a paid sponsor or interviewee, contact us at 718-713-2289 or savvycentralradio@gmail.com.